So afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry for the delay. It seems to have been a slight technical glitch. Happy to be here again. This morning we had a presentation, and I'm going to be repeating it. Uh, as you can see from the slide on the screen, we're looking at a journey to resilient relationships. How do we thrive? How do we do well in life's challenging contexts? So we're going to talk about some of the factors. The end point is to prevent unhealthy relationships, including intimate partner violence. But to get there, we really have to look at the process and really look at ourselves and see how we can have and ensure that we maintain healthy relationships. So the second slide speaks to the context of this webinar, which is the Massy um, initiative. And if you could go to the second slide, please, Tony Ray. And just as part of the explanation, I'm in Jamaica and we're having significant challenges with internet and many other things. So I'm not on screen. The Massy initiative is an attempt to try to pull together all the elements of well-being in all the domains and promote self-care. So it's looking at personal development. It's looking at how the companies and departments can have their interventions and how wellness and benefits and Massy Group in general can support the appropriate interventions that meet the appropriate needs for well-being, including social and interpersonal well-being. So we already have initiatives in some of the Massy Group, the Employee Assistance Program. You'll hear a little more later about the MyPulse app, which is a virtual resource. And then we have all the preventative healthcare programs that you'd be aware of. The Massy Pulse is just a name we're given to formalize all of these different initiatives. And the webinar is one of those tools that we'll be using to respond to the needs that are out there. Guyana and other countries have mentioned concerns about violence in relationships and gender-based violence. And Massy Guyana took the initiative to request this forum. So we're going to be looking at relationships, healthy relationships, understanding that relationships are only one domain of wellness. And this graphic you see on the screen highlights all the domains from environmental, spiritual, intellectual, physical, social, interpersonal, occupational, emotional, and financial. And I'm sure as you look at it, you realize that relationships have overlap with many of the other domains. They have overlap with the occupational, with the emotional, obviously with the financial as well, intellectual. So even though we have these separated as domains, they all overlap. And if you're trying to have a healthy relationship, you have to understand how well you are in each of these domains because they all affect each other. But today we're focusing on relationships. So let's go to the next slide, Tony Ray. Understanding how the webinar is going to go. So we're going to increase awareness in all of these areas. We're going to use an acronym called KAISO, which we're going to talk about some more, but it's really emphasizing the fact that you have to increase your knowledge if you're going to facilitate a change. You'll have to increase your self-awareness so that you understand what's going on with you and with other people. So self-awareness and other awareness. You have to learn how to increase your insight with mindfulness and critical thinking so that you don't respond automatically. Because if you are more intentional, you can disrupt any unhealthy cycles. And these skills, therefore, have to be applied. You have to practice them. You have to be proactive, and this will lead to resilience. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these components that can help you improve your relationship. Very often it includes inward reach, which is really looking at yourself and understanding what's going on with you. And then the outward stretch, understanding the other people, understanding what's going on with them, and how you can ensure that your contribution to the relationship is constructive and healthy. So the next slide. One of the reasons why this is so important right now is that we are living in very uncertain times. It's challenging, as I don't have to tell you, whether it's Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica, right down to warships in the Southern Caribbean. And when we look out further, there are all the geopolitical challenges that are affecting us economically, all the interpersonal challenges that are occurring as resources are limited. So it's a hard time, and these times lead to complex crises that, you have mental overload, you have anxiety, you have trauma from the past. But mindfulness, managing your mind, helps you to deal with life's waves. It's like an anchor and at the same time a sail. An anchor that when you need, it can keep you stable. A sail that if you set it in the right direction with the right awareness and skills, it can take you where you want to go. So we're talking here about the importance of mind management and of intentional choices. Intentional choices are the ones you make that are not driven by reaction, automatic, impulsive, gut level. And that becomes very important when you're dealing with your emotions and the emotions of anger and the emotions of jealousy and those that can lead to domestic violence, family violence, any kind of intimate partner violence. So uncertain times, stressful times, your best tool, your survival skill is managing your mind and learning to be intentional in what you choose to do. Let's have the next slide. These times are going to be challenging because, as I say, they escalate to irritability. People will get more irritable, some will become more withdrawn, some will become more aggressive and lead to conflict. All of these increase risk for unhealthy relationships. So again, if you can be mindful, then you can be more effective in emotional regulation. If you know what you're feeling, you can deal with it and then reduce the anger flare-ups and other emotional things that might cause you to behave in an unhealthy manner. One of the important components of critical thinking is that it challenges the assumptions that fuel mistrust and aggression, etc. So critical thinking, we're going to talk a little bit about that too, and how to kind of get out of your head and look at what's going on and learn to be more rational rather than just respond from your gut. Next slide. Chronic stress and trauma increases aggression and miscommunication. So as I said before, mindfulness anchors you, and at the same time, intentional thinking creates a space like a sail to move you forward. Next slide. Now, I'm sure you have said, or you know people who say, that's just the way I am. It's just the way I am, and I've always been this way. And we need to accept that, yes, you have behaved the way you did, you have thought the way you did, you felt the way you did because of who you were at the time and what you understood. But we have to learn to say that that's the way I have been, and I can choose to be different even in small ways. You each will have had examples of how you've changed, how you used to do certain things that you don't do anymore, how you do certain things now and do them better because you've been motivated to be more effective. It might be a skill that you learned from anything from playing football to cooking something, some particular meal or a task, a skill at work. You don't tell yourself, well, I can only do the meal with these spices. You tell yourself, I want to do it better. I want to try something different. I want to improve my efficacy. So you try a different set of spices. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, you don't stop trying. You do other things. And I think that's really important. You have a power to choose. You can choose to think and feel and behave differently. It may not always be successful, but you need to understand that failing can be failing forward. Failing can be a lesson that you learn that allows you to try something different. And this is true in relationships. Whether you're a parent, whether you're a spouse, a partner, a sibling, a best friend, you try to do something to explain and it doesn't work. If the relationship is important enough, you will and come again. So you have a choice. And let's look at some of the ways that we can move forward to make better choices. So the next slide. I'm going to go through this very quickly because I really wanted to highlight here that you're going to see many tips, and I'm sure many of you will have seen these already. Tips for healthy relationships. You know, talk and listen, respect each other, trust each other, spend time together. These all make sense. Yes, we should do all of those things, but do we? Well, we're going to get to talk about that. The next slide. Deal with conflicts calmly. Support each other's goals. Keep your own life too. Don't give up on yourself and merge with somebody else. Show appreciation. Say thanks. Allow yourself to be open and vulnerable and share your feelings. At the same time, be flexible and willing to change. Now, if we had a lot of time, we could go into each of these. But you can find these anywhere in social media and in your religious readings, and all of these things tell you about the way we should be in an ideal world. The problem is that our minds don't always conform, and we get a lot of barriers to engaging these if we don't understand what is preventing us from doing these things. So my focus today is not to go through these tips, which I know you can get everywhere. You can Google a TED Talk, you can go to the WhatsApp, the app for MyPulse, the MyPulse app, and get supportive information. The problem is when you get it, how do you use it? And we're going to talk about that today. So the next slide.
Doc, just quickly,
Yes.
I think Vicky just asked if you could just go back 2 slides quickly. I think that they just wanted to catch something on that slide. Yeah. Vicky Easton?
So
Okay.
I'm not controlling the slides, Tony is.
Yeah, that's fine. She said thank you. You can move ahead. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I developed this acronym KAISO. KAISO breaks down the components that help you to manage change more effectively. Because I really believe that if you can name it, you can tame it. If you can understand what is going on different levels, you're more likely to be able to control it. And let me explain why. Very often we get these tips, like those 10 tips a while ago. And those would qualify as strategic skills. Here are things to do when there's a problem, when there's an opportunity. But guess what? Many of us have a challenge doing these things and doing them consistently and doing them right. And part of the reason is that we haven't done the preliminary thinking and understanding and awareness raising and insight to know which strategic skill works for us and how to use it. So KAISO is a way of breaking down how we look at a situation. And before we decide to try a certain strategy, we stop and say, okay, what do I know about this situation? What am I aware of? What's my insight? It allows you to pause, and instead of automatically reacting from a gut level, you can use that space to make intentional responses. It builds healthy relationships, it prevents conflict, and it's not only a way of thinking, it's actually a practical tool, something that you can actually do in that moment where you're feeling angry, feeling sad, feeling confused. Stop, pause, use KAISO. So let's move on to the next slide. We want to name it to tame it, but the next slide will show us some of the strategies we need to use. Well, you have to begin by using your critical thinking skills. Pause and recognize what is triggering you. Assess what is going on, and then choose how to respond and apply these strategies regularly to build a new habit. We already do that when we're driving. You know, if we're driving and we're trying to choose where we're going to, we will stop and say, okay, the traffic is looking like this. We're using Waze. Where do we want to go? Okay, how quickly can we get there? Is there something we need to do on the way? etc., etc. We critically assess and make informed decisions. We don't just turn left because the light is green. We decide if we need to wait and turn right when the traffic changes. So when we're practicing Kaiso, before responding in tense or uncomfortable moments, it's important to pause and ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling? Why am I angry? Why am I upset? Why am I feeling anxious? Why am I feeling disregarded? What's going on here? Is it that this is triggering some old doubt or belief? Is this situation reminding me of something in the past? And am I overreacting to it? It doesn't mean that your reaction is invalid, but if you're going to make a choice for what to do, you have to assess just how significant the problem is. And if you're not seeing the problem clearly, but what you're seeing is something from the past or from somebody else, then you may not make the most effective, efficient choice. What do you really need to come out of this situation and why? Is what you need healthy? No, I'm suggesting we all think about this. You know, the next time you're in a situation where you're tense or angry or sad and you're trying to decide what to do with, maybe to quarrel with somebody or send them a text or not speak to them or do something impulsive, maybe you need to stop and say, is this worth it? What is it that's really bothering me? Is there another way to solve this? Because there are always other solutions. And what's going on with the other person? Why did they do that? Are they responding to something from their own life and it really has nothing to do with me? Are they being irritable? And is it because of something happening at home and nothing to do with he and I at work? So if we pause and do that, we are more likely to come up with healthy solutions that prevent the escalation of the problem. So keep in mind, folks, the idea of Kaiso is to stop and be intentional. You have to consider the long-term effects of your response. If you're going to have healthy relationships, whether it's intimate partner, family, work related, you have to be aware of what your goals and purpose are. And make sure that your choices are aligned with your goals and purpose, but also your values. Because we're not saying you should just do things to make everything nice and pretty, because maybe nice and pretty is not possible. Maybe this is a toxic situation and your decision needs to be something that moves you away from it. But it needs to be informed. It shouldn't just be impulsive, what you always do, just the way I am. So I really want to encourage you all to think about those scenarios that do cause you stress, especially interpersonal stress, upset your interpersonal well-being, and begin to unpack what is going on here. Does it have something to do with something that was said to me before? Maybe I can make a different choice about what to do. So let's move to the next slide. Anger, of course, is something that we know triggers a lot of aggression, but it's only one of the emotions. And so as we talk about that inward reach of balancing yourself and your interpersonal wellness, your social wellness, identifying your triggers is very important. A lot of times we don't even know what's bothering us until it's really affecting us badly. And one of the things that we need to learn to do, for example, is to manage our stress. Sometimes we don't even realize that tension in our neck, and we're grinding our teeth, we're biting our nails, we're snapping at somebody, we can't concentrate. All of these are signs that we're stressed, but we're so anxious to push through, to be resilient. And I use that word carefully because you can be being resilient because of the work you're doing, but you're not being resilient because of your health. It's not serving your relationship. So you tough it out to get the job done, but in the meantime, you're stressed. And then that stress is not identified because you haven't put words to it because you're so busy pushing through. And then you don't express the feelings in a healthy way. So instead of crying or laughing or sharing with a friend or saying a prayer and getting it out, you keep it in there and you may express it in an unhealthy way. And this is where we get that escalation into conflict in relationships and sometimes, unfortunately, violence in the relationship. So here we're focusing on identifying your triggers. So I want you to just think for a minute, what are the things that trigger you, that push your buttons? How well do you understand why they push your buttons? How well do you understand what you do when your buttons are pushed? What have you tried to do differently because of that awareness? And what can you keep trying to do to understand your triggers so that you manage them, they don't manage you. Critical relationship skill, but a critical self-care skill. Next slide. So we talk a little more about critical thinking. It's like being a detective in your thoughts. You know, sometimes we all have different thoughts going on at the same time. You might be driving the car, and at the same time, you're thinking about what you're going to get for lunch when you reach your destination. At the same time, you're thinking about the fact that you shouldn't get high calorie food, you shouldn't have salt. And at the same time, you're thinking, oh, yes, I need to go to the supermarket. So there's always a lot of thoughts going on in our mind. Critical thinking is that ability to be aware of these multiple choices, multiple thoughts. Be aware of it and be able to understand which one is the one you really need to focus on. When you're driving, and I use it as an example, you really need to focus on the road and safety. But you can get distracted as you worry about your daughter, or you're concerned about what you're going to do this evening, or you just remembered something you left at work that you needed to carry. If you allow your mind to go there, you're going to have a problem. So critical thinking is like having a superpower. It helps you to look at things from different angles and then choose what to look at. If I write 6 on a piece of paper and put it on the table between us, you might see 6, I will see 6, what you may see 9 because you're on the other side of the table. Changing your perception is a critical part of critical thinking. Being able to see things beyond what you are feeling, beyond what your impulses are saying. And when you're able to do that, you're going to be able to be more effective and make the best choices because you realize there are more choices to make. And this is true in all aspects of life and in particular relationships, because relationships have so many things. You know, it's affected by your family and what you learned when you were young, your last boyfriend or girlfriend, what your granny told you, what your boss is saying to you, how you're feeling right now. All of this is going on as you respond to a scenario, what somebody is actually doing. So I want you to think about that because it takes practice. You're never perfect at it, but it's something that we all need to learn to do. Because if we use non-critical thinking, it's like being an autopilot. You know, it's like you drive to the intersection, the cars in front of you have stopped, you stop, and then a car starts to drive, and you don't look at the traffic light. The car is moving, so it's your turn. And you don't realize that the car in front of you is braking the red light and you're just following them because you're on autopilot. In life, very often in relationships, we're on autopilot. Somebody triggers us and we respond, they irritate us, or they do something nice and we think, oh, this is great. And you don't stop and think, okay, is that really a nice thing? Critical thinking is very important for healthy relationships. Next slide. Two other strategies I wanted to talk about, which are really important. Critical thinking is about what's going on in your mind and being able to manage it by stepping back and having an understanding of all the perceptions that you're having, the things that are influencing you before you make a choice of how to respond. Now, one of the things you do when you're practicing critical thinking is you manage your self-talk. Now, this slide is highlighting 2 aspects of that, which I think are so important in my work as a therapist and also in the work I've done in violence prevention and working with men. You know, we all grow up and we develop internal scripts, internal conversations that are going on. I'm not talking about psychotic conversations, but we all have it. You know, we hear in our head, you know, I really should do this, I shouldn't do that. If I do this, that might happen, etc., etc. And that self-talk is very often influenced by things from our past. Positive self-talk is like being your own cheerleader. It's encouraging you with kind words. It's speaking objectively and not judging. Negative self-talk is the opposite. It's very judgmental. It's being too hard on yourself, and it's repeating negative things that were said to you before. It's really important that we understand, because if that negative self-talk is what we're focusing on, then we're going to respond in a negative fashion, in a defensive fashion. And very often that is what leads to disruptions in relationships. If you in your head are always saying, you know, nobody really thinks I'm good enough, I'm not worthwhile, it's just like Granny told me when I was young, you know, I would never be that good, or I'm not as good as my brother, etc., etc. Then if somebody in your present life says something to you that sounds critical, it's going to trigger that negative feeling, and respond by withdrawing, by feeling sad, or you could respond angrily by saying, no, don't say that to me. It hurts me when you say that. You're not really being hurt by this person. You're being hurt by what was said to you long ago that you created a whole complex about. You can't manage that if you don't acknowledge it. And I want you all to think now, as I'm talking about, what are some of the negative self-talk messages in your head that you're too what, or you should be what, or you'll never what. Because if you can begin to understand those and identify them, and if you can increase your insight, because remember, Kaiso is knowing that you have this conversation in your head, being aware when you're having it, having insight as to why you're having it, then you can strategically and skillfully. You don't have to go down that negative path. Huh? And sometimes the path is positive, and that's good because you're a cheerleader. But sometimes it's not so good if the path is telling you things that are not real. Everybody loves you, you're a great guy, everything will go right, and then something goes wrong, somebody doesn't like you, and you come back to reality. So negative and positive self-talk are a natural part of the mind's processes of thinking, but you need to manage them so that they don't disrupt your intentional choices. What you do want to disrupt are negative self-talk patterns. So you must dispute them. You learn to see, and this is why mantras very often don't work as well as they could, because you may have a mantra that says, I am wonderfully made. I'm perfect in God's light. Um, I can do all that was intended for me. Yes, that sounds great. But if in the back of your mind you still have that voice from your past saying, no, you're not, because you're too fat, or you're too thin, or you never got good grades like your sister, or your hair is not good enough, or you didn't pass your exams, if that is going on, then it's going to counter your attempt to have positive self-talk. You need to dispute it. You need to say, I am wonderfully made, and it doesn't matter what mommy said when I was a teenager that I would never be any good, because I have been good. So you have to add on that component to dispute the origin of the negative thought. Because if you don't do that, it really doesn't change what's going on in the back of your mind. So positive and negative self-talk are important to understand. You need to be able to manage it critically, and you need to be able to dispute the negative self-talk. But if you don't understand what's going on, you can't dispute it. And that's, again, why I say Kaiso. You need to understand, you need to be aware, you need to have insight. And then when you want to dispute it, your disputation, the strategy you use will address the cause and not just be a nice little band-aid. It's like going to the doctor and the doctor cleans up, wipes off the blood and puts on a band-aid. That's fine. But they've not dealt with the antibiotic. They haven't cleaned out the gunk that was in the cut. And so that's going to be there still being toxic. So these are some of the skills and strategies we want to encourage you to consider. And again, in the short time that we have, we can't get into detail, but a lot of this is online. If you Google it, you can learn more and see what applies to you. So let's go. And again, the MyPulse app has a lot of healthy strategies, lifestyle guidance in the videos, in the media that can be very useful. So if we engage in these practices, then we're less likely to have unhealthy relationships that lead to violence. You're always going to have conflict. You're always going to have disagreement, but they don't have to be destructive. The problem is that when we don't understand how to manage our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, we will end up in a cycle of violence. And that cycle usually includes phases. The first one is tension building. And then there's some acute incident that triggers the real trauma and the violence or the aggression. And then you have some kind of honeymoon reconciliation where, okay, it won't happen again, I promise you, et cetera, and maybe a calm, and then it starts again. Because the tension building involves increasing stress and irritability, and they're early warning signs, but very often we ignore them because we don't want to believe that there's going to be a problem, or we don't understand what they mean, or we just hope that it's not real. The problem is the acute phase follows, which is characterized by that conflict or that abuse. Very often in an abusive relationship, the abuser will then afterwards apologize or say they're sorry, promise to change, or they just don't talk about it and everybody pretends that everything is going to be okay. And then you get the repeat. So next slide. Each of us need to be aware of when tensions are rising and when we're stuffing it. If you want to stay in that honeymoon phase, you ignore the problems. You want to pretend that everything is okay, you ignore them, but they're not settled. And in order to avoid conflict, you may bring up, a complaint or cave into a decision or whatever when there's some disagreement. So be aware when this is happening. And it happens in a normal relationship, but what we're talking about here is those relationships that have gone into that unhealthy and abusive zone. Because what happens is that as the tension rises, everybody gets stressed. The person who is the one who's usually aggressive begins to, arm themselves with their concerns and what's wrong, etc. The one who is usually victimized will begin to try to placate, try to be good, try to avoid. And instead, what happens is that it escalates into a big argument, and the arguments have the insults and the put downs, etc., bringing up the past. Very uncomfortable, but unfortunately, because it happens so often, we can become comfortable with the discomfort. And we don't recognize that, hey, I can do something to prevent this getting worse. So the next slide. And what happens is, since we don't do anything and we don't understand what's going on, you get that explosion. That might be a big quarrel with a lot of painful things said. It might be physical. It might be even worse, abuse. Very often because simple day-to-day problems are left unsettled. We're too stressed to talk about it. We're afraid that we might get left. We don't want to, scare the children, et cetera, et cetera. So we end up with an explosion. And maybe if you're in a relationship where there's some kind of commitment, it might be a healthy commitment. You love and care for each other. You have children together and you care about them. It may be an unhealthy commitment. You depend on each other. One is financing the other person, or you think abusive relationships are normal and you're getting what you deserve. There's a lot of thinking that goes on that keeps people in this situation. And again, we don't have enough time to go through it. But what happens is that we then stay in this kind of honeymoon phase. You kiss and make up, or you just pretend that nothing happened. But that doesn't last, Maybe you cover for each other. So the person who is physically harmed, covers up their bruises, etc. The person who did it helps to cover up and pretend like nothing happened. But the point is that it's a pattern. And when it has happened once or twice, you need to understand that this is likely to happen again and you need to take charge. So we're talking about the healthy skills you need to use to prevent this becoming a pattern. And some of these same skills you can use if it has become a pattern and you want to break the cycle. But we have to remember that there's always those relationships that are not going to change without some serious intervention. Let's have the next slide. After the explosion and that honeymoon phase, the cycle repeats over and over. But the cycle may become even shorter. And in severely damaged relationships, you may never have that honeymoon phase, and it will just alternate between tensions, arguments, and explosions. It really is important to understand that you don't want to let it get to that stage, not for you or not for anybody you care about. Some of us are bystanders when it comes to domestic violence and family violence. We're seeing it happen, but we think we shouldn't interfere with man and woman business. And then you get horrible headline news, as we've seen over the weeks and months and years of murders. Very often the perpetrator is a man, the victim is a woman, but we also know that very often the victims are men, but not necessarily physical. It can be emotional violence. It's not good for anybody. We all need to understand it and the role we can play. So whether it's happening to us, and it's a healthier range of just arguments that are disruptive or the unhealthy range of abuse, or whether it's something happening to somebody we care about and we're bystanders, we need to understand how we can play a role to intervene, to break that cycle. Next slide. So I want you to be thinking about your own life, your situation, your community, your family, where you're seeing this take place. If you're in a long-term relationship, it's sometimes really hard to change that cycle. And the tips you can use, of course, if it's a relationship that has a healthy commitment, then you can begin to work together to be empathic, to be more patient, to start with small things that can change, to celebrate what is working, and to keep communicating, have fun. But don't pretend it's not happening. And if necessary, get professional help. And when I say professional help, it could be talking to a faith leader, a pastor, a counselor, a psychologist, your family doctor. Very often, as I told you, your mind is your main tool for managing stress and managing relationships. But sometimes we get stuck in our mind because we're not thinking critically, because we're so programmed. And we need to talk it out. We need to put it into words for somebody to hear and say, hold on. You mean you really think this? Or you just said that as if it's a fact. It's just an impression. And sometimes that helps us to break that cycle. But seeking help, professional or otherwise, is very important, especially if there's a risk. And I would just add here that in situations where there is physical violence and there's a threat to safety, the person who is the victim of that perpetrator needs to have an escape plan, a safety plan. And I would suggest you can Google that, because it's very straightforward in terms of making a list of who you can tell, where you can go, what you would carry if you leave, what you do about the children. So often we don't want to think about that reality, so we don't make a plan. It's like in Jamaica with Melissa. Many people didn't believe the hurricane would hit because they usually miss. But we got hit last year. Well, we almost got hit last year. And some people had that as a wake-up call. But other people said, oh, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They didn't make a plan. And now they have no supplies. They have no roof, no light. They have nowhere to go to. So I really want people to realize that you can be intentional. You can make a choice. And if something going on in your life and your relationship makes you uncomfortable, that's your red flag. That's your red flag that, hey, I need to give this some thought. I need to go on the My Post app. I need to listen to a TED Talk. I need to talk to a friend. Let me get out of my head and get some feedback. All right? So hope you're thinking like that for those of you who are in long-term relationships or intend to be. But the next slide has a slightly different focus. It's about those early relationships and the importance of the red flags. When you're meeting somebody for the first time and dating and getting to know each other, there are things you need to really strategically look at. For example, what's their family background? What have they grown up learning about relationships and what's normal and acceptable? What has happened in their previous relationships in terms of how they treated their partner and how they were treated? What are the topics that you find that they either talk too much about or avoid talking? How do they treat you? Do they respect your opinion? Do they want to hear your views, or are they dismissive? When making decisions about what to do together, are they controlling? All of these are red flags and warning signs. And the sooner you can identify these patterns, both in terms of what they're doing and how you are reacting, the more likely you're able to manage the relationship and how it develops. Ongoing mindfulness supports deliberate change rather than a reactive escalation. Again, in these scenarios, you're meeting somebody new. It's not just about watching them and seeing how they behave and their history. You have to look at yourself also. Are you part of a pattern of selecting certain types of people? Do you like people who are really quiet and don't talk to you much and you don't have to engage with them? And then you realize that that means you don't really know them and things go wrong. Or is it somebody who is really gregarious and friendly and chatting a lot and very social? And you don't realize that that is all a facade and that's a manipulation and a game they're playing. So again, there are things we can do early in a relationship, but all of them mean that you can be more empowered and more resilient and prevent ending up in a violent relationship. We all have those external stressors from our past and our present that interact with our personal history and influence what we do. We're working towards this process of mindful self-management. And I just want to highlight that these changes take time. So while you're trying to facilitate the change, you also have to make sure that you are safe. While you're trying to facilitate the change and negotiate it with your partner, you also have to be taking care of your stress. Whole life balance is a phrase we've been using. It's not about work-life balance, because you have to also balance your social and your financial and your spiritual and your cognitive and your occupational. All of them need to be a work in progress. You're never perfectly in balance. But if you ignore some of those domains, for example, the relationship and social domain, it's going to throw off everything and things can go wrong without you realizing it. Let's have the next slide. So I think some of you will understand how this relates to conflict and relationships. And it's a little humorous, but it's a reminder that it's the small things. If the toilet seat is up and it's a problem for one person, or it's down and it's not, and it's a problem for somebody else, ignoring it doesn't seem like a big deal, except that if you're starting the day and you're already irritated and you're already stressed and it's building on other things that are going on, then this becomes a significant trigger. It's a reminder that the small things need to be dealt with. And maybe a decision needs to be made that you leave it up and nobody quarrels about it, or you leave it down, or you leave it wherever it is. And the next person coming just makes the change that's necessary. It's not worth having that in the back of your mind the next time something happens and you think, yeah, he's never doing the right thing. He's always X and wine, like the toilet. And it becomes part of a whole argument. And the same is true whether it's a she or a he. Anyway, it's just a little pointer to say that in your life, what are the day-to-day things that stress you that perhaps you need to deal with because they're building up and leading you towards an escalation in your relationship? And maybe the people you're in a relationship, you need to talk to them about this too, because you're all in this thing together. Next slide. So we chose to have this webinar now in the calendar because when Guyana approached us and wanted to begin to look at these issues, and we realized that, of course, there are issues across the Caribbean and the region, because remember, we have South America and North America partners and colleagues. We said, a change process requires an initial kind of awareness raising. You want people to start thinking, yes, I didn't think of that. Wow, I didn't know that. Or even I don't agree with that. Whatever it is, you want them to be paying attention. But you want something to continue to support them paying attention and maybe increasing their knowledge and awareness and insight and learning strategies and skills so that when opportunity arises, they can make healthy choices. Well, guess what? Coming up is International Men's Day, November 19th. Lots of stuff is going to be in the media about men and gender and health and men and prostate and men and violence and men and fathering. All very relevant to our understanding of healthy relationships. So pay attention, not only if you're a man, but anybody, because the issues raised are going to be important. Have conversations around the lunchroom and the water cooler and while you're waiting on transport, whatever. Engage with the topic, because then we're going to lead right into 16 days to end violence against women. And wouldn't it be great if we're already thinking about this so that when we get to those 16 days, we begin to understand, hey, here's a talk I should go to, or maybe I should talk to my daughter about this, or my younger brother, or maybe I need to understand from my mother why this happened. Maybe I need to volunteer. Maybe I need to tell people about the hotline that can be accessed. Once you have that knowledge and awareness and insight, you'll be amazed at the ways in which it can give you more control of your life and also make you more of a contributing part of the community. And when we get to World AIDS Day on December 1st, well, of course, that is a relationship that uh, is very relevant. Sexual relationships, the whole issue of sexual health, the whole issue of sexual violence, the issue of consent, the issue of different sexual needs and desires, and the fact that in a lot of relationships, a lot of stress is about who wants sex, who wants what kind of sex, when they want it. And you don't talk about it because we've been programmed in our culture not to talk about sex in the context of a relationship. We will talk about sex in all other kinds of contexts and describe all kinds of things. But when it comes to me and you and I, it's a no-go zone. And then it leads to that escalation and adds to the toilet seat being up and adds to who is spending too much money, and everything adds up. So we have an opportunity over the next few weeks to think about these things. And the final one that's not on this list that I'll mention is the holiday season. The holiday season can be a very stressful time. It's a time when people think they should be happy, but many people are sad. They're depressed because they lost loved ones. They're sad because they haven't achieved the things they wanted to achieve for the year. They have family members who are going through problems. They have children who expect expensive gifts. You and your partner, you and your family are not on the same wavelength about how much money should be spent on decorations and food. Some people don't want to celebrate, some don't. You're in a relationship with people from other cultures. There's so much that goes on that affects relationships and unfortunately can fuel that escalation. Again, be aware, be thoughtful, be intentional, learn and grow through this period and share this with others. Use your Kaiso skills, you know, do that inward reach and understand yourself better. Reach out to those close to you. Be part of conversations. Let's make this really a process that helps to change the culture we're a part of. Next slide. So it's just reminding us that relationship problems are common. You can deal with them. Look for your red flags. Be patient. Understand what has happened in the past that's affecting you now, and get support, whether it's virtual support or face-to-face support or just talking to a friend. Take action. The final slides, please. This is a practical tool. If you look at each of the domains of wellness, you can look and kind of keep track of how you're doing. Can you imagine if you were to just every day you get up and before you get out of bed, whether you say your prayers or meditate, you think, okay, where am I in terms of my emotional well-being? What do I need to do? What have I done that worked before? I need to do more of. And the same is true for physical, social, interpersonal, cognitive, occupational, spiritual, financial, all the different domains. And it might be just as simple as giving thanks, setting some intention, but really organizing your thoughts so that you're managing all these domains. So you start the day that way. Or you might want to end the day by looking at how well you're doing and clearing your head before you go to sleep. Here's another slide, and it's the last slide. Tony Ray.
That's the last slide,
Last
Doc.
slide.
That was the last slide.
Oh, didn't get the set I sent you. Okay. All right. So we also can look at it in a more complicated way to look back at each domain and look at what is influencing us, etc. But the point is, you can make a choice. You can be in control. You can make decisions that help you have that whole life balance. It's not all about work. It's not even all about family. It's not even all about money. It's about all of these things. The more you manage your mind, the more you'll make healthy choices, and the better your life will be. So thanks for paying attention. It was a lot, but it's just to introduce, and maybe over the next few days and weeks and into the holiday season, some of this will be relevant and you'll think about it and learn and grow a bit more. Thanks for your attention. Back to you, Tony.
Thank you, Raven. Handing over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Weller, so much for taking the time out today for doing these 2 sessions in educating us on and reminding some of us on how to have healthy relationships. Again, I'd want to say for Guyana, the reason we requested this forum is to help with the prevalent issue of domestic abuse in Guyana. So for persons that are in abusive relationships, we encourage you to seek help, reach out to family members, to friends, or even a stranger. It may just save your life. Some initiatives that have been put in place. We have the Ministry of Social Protection, Human and Social Protection. They have a hotline 914. We've gotten a flyer from them that we'll be posting around the different Massy locations. The government of Guyana has also implemented an ankle monitoring bracelet, which is to help strengthen the interventions against domestic violence, and it will allow the authorities to track the movements of offenders by sending real-time automated alerts. And this will be given when persons have a protection order in place, because there are still some complaints that perpetrators still violate the protection order. Personally, here at Massy, we have an employee assistance program where we have psychologists to support you along any problems that you may have, whether it be in your intimate relationships or family-wise. So Massy is providing that free of cost. It is also very confidential. So if you do need assistance and you want to be a part of that employee assistance program, you can just reach out to any one of us in HR and you can get that assistance. So thank you so much once again, Dr. Weller, and I hand over to you, Katrina or
Tony. I don't know if you want to take, there are a couple questions or comments that are coming in. I didn't know if you wanted to take those, and then we'll maybe you can just touch on my pulse whilst we have everyone here. I know we're over time, so we'll be super quick.
Sure. I am looking to see if I see the questions.
So we have a comment here from Vicky saying the more you manage your mind, the better life will be. Thanks, thanking the Dr. Weller and the team for this presentation. I thought I saw a question in the what is emotional violence, Dr. Weller?
Can you read that, Katrina?
The question was, what is emotional violence?
Okay, well, emotional violence can take many forms, but really it's anything that makes a person feel bad. So it can be criticism, it can be cursing, it can be anything that demeans them, says that they're not good enough, they're ugly, they can't get any other partner. It can be withdrawal of emotion, so it can be coldness. It can be not talking to them, it can be ignoring them, it can be making them feel unwanted. So there are many forms of emotional violence, as you'll realize, anybody can do that. It's not gender specific, it's not age and stage specific, it's not depending on how much money you, anybody can hurt somebody else by making them feel bad. And unfortunately, if you know what people care about and if you know their vulnerabilities, which very often you do when you're in a relationship, then you know where they can be hurt. You know where their pain points are. And an abusive partner will know that and will know how to manipulate the person simply by hurting them or making them be afraid that they'll be hurt. Emotional violence also can include shaming and embarrassing them, saying things about them in front of other people. Unfortunately, there are many ways to do this. And again, if it's happening in our lives, it's really important for us to name it and tame it. And just a quick point, a lot of these strategies we talked about, the positive self-talk, the disputing, the critical thinking, etc., are really important stress managing tools, right? It's not just about managing relationships, it's also managing what's going on. The more you have that self-awareness of what's stressing you, where it's affecting you in your body, why it's happening, the more you can then choose, whether you need to exercise, get a massage, sleep, have a hot bath, you can make the healthiest choice. So those are some thoughts to consider.
Thanks, Dr. Weller. In the chat, we put in a little link to a quick question, just asking whether there are any topics that you would like to hear. One of them that has popped up, Dr. Weller, is coping with stress. So perhaps, I know that you've done many sessions with us on that, so perhaps we need to do that going forward. So I'm just going to hand over to Tony Ray, who will just quickly let everyone know about the MyPulse app, which is an app available to all Massy employees across all regions. It's bilingual. And so thank you, Tony Ray, and thank you so much for a wonderful session, everybody.
Thank you so much, Katrina, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Katrina mentioned, MyPulse is one of the many tools we have in our Massy Pulse toolkit. Webinars, of course, being another one as well, where employees can get information to help them on their health and well-being journey. So Doc would have made mention to it many, many times, and my colleague would have just placed the sign-up link for MyPulse in the chat. So you can access the program via an app, which is available on the Play Store as well as the App Store, or you can use it via web browser. And it gives you an opportunity to access a host of resources through small tidbits that they call healthy habits. There are things called journeys as well on a variety of topics. There are also videos. We can do step challenges, and you can do those step challenges with your company or country, or you can do it with the wider Massy family as well. And we know persons within Massy are very, very competitive. So that is just one way in which we're trying to promote a culture of health and well-being through the Massy group, through that MyPulse app. So we ask persons to just try it out. We know that sometimes tech is not everybody's thing, and it's not going to be for everyone. But of course, feel free to sign up. It's free for everyone. And you can try it out and see if it helps you on your health and well-being journey. Yeah. So I want to thank all of you for joining our session this afternoon. I want to thank Raven and the team in Guyana for suggesting this session and hosting as well. They did a fantastic job. And of course, I want to thank our featured speaker, Dr. Weller, who has been on this journey with us for many, many years, for coming on despite the circumstances and sharing his expertise and his knowledge with us. You will see him very soon, I'm sure, in another webinar. But of course, I want to thank you, our attendees, for joining the session today and this morning. And we look forward to seeing you in another session. Take care, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.